Hi, this is Chris with Fischer Workshops. In this video, learn how to customize a leather pen case with exotic leather or other materials. For this project, I'll be using alligator skin to cover several portions of this case. A printable PDF pattern and instructions for this project can be downloaded at fischerworkshops.com. To get our latest video releases and tutorials, please subscribe to Fischer Workshops. The body of the case will be made from 1.6 and 8mm thick tanned leathers. So let's start by first cutting out the leather pieces we'll be using for this project. Alligator skin is really tough and can't be easily cut with just a sharp knife. So I'll use a round knife to cut with, pressing downward on the areas I want to trim. When cutting out the pieces of your exotic skin, make sure the pattern on the skin is balanced with your pattern shape. For example, the alligator skin I'm using on the bottom of this case was taken from the tail. So I wanted to make sure that the scales were centered on my pattern piece, as you can see here. With a stitching groover, I now want to carve out my stitching grooves where necessary. For the interior tab, I used a thin piece of leather, so I'm just going to mark my stitching line rather than carve a groove. Carving stitching grooves into the thin leather will result in your thread breaking through the leather. Alligator skin has a rough interior surface, so I'm going to stitch a thin piece of leather to the rough side. First, apply a little contact cement to both pieces and set aside to set. While the glue is setting, I'm going to apply horse oil to the tanned leather to darken it. If you don't have horse oil, then I recommend mink oil. Over time, tanned leather will naturally darken to an even more beautiful tan. Buff off any excess oil still remaining on the leather's surface. Now that our glue is set, let's adhere the belt pieces together and trim off the excess leather. With an edge beveler, trim the edges and draw out your stitching lines with a stitching groover. Using a fine diamond-shaped chisel, punch stitching holes across your stitching lines. For this project, I recommend saddle stitching the ends together with a thin waxed thread. This is the same thread I use when stitching a smaller project, such as a watch band. Apply a little burnishing gum and burnish the edges with a wood slicker or a rotary wood burnisher. If the edges are still a little rough, then first sand until smooth before burnishing. Now I want to apply a little cement and glue the interior tab to the exterior tab. After the glue sets, fix the pieces together. Now mark the edges where the belt will be fixed. Apply cement to the edges of both pieces of leather. If necessary, roughen edges with sandpaper so the glue will adhere better. Now also mark where the exotic skin will be fixed to the case body. Roughen the leather surface again with a little sandpaper and apply a little cement. Now fix the belt to the case front and bevel the edges with an edge beveler. Although this is optional, I recommend affixing a piece of leather to the interior top end of the front piece. This will protect and strengthen the leather at the opening of the case. Now that the glue has set, I can finish adhering the other pieces together. Bevel the edges of the mouth opening and interior tab with an edge beveler. Using my round knife, I carefully skive the edges of the interior mouthpiece. Mark your stitching lines with a stitching groover and punch your stitching holes. Saddle stitch the ends together. Next, I punched stitching holes for the mouth opening and saddle stitched, using a larger thread so we could compare how each thread thickness looks. Thicker thread will be more dramatic and noticeable, but not necessarily better. You can decide which is better for your project. After you finish stitching the mouth opening, bevel the edges with a beveler and burnish. At this point in the project, I'm going to use a slightly stronger adhesive cement to finish up with. Using a coin the size of a nickel, round the corners of the alligator skin. Here you can either use a stitching chisel or a hand stitching chisel like the one I use here. Hand stitching chisels are simply more accurate at punching holes when penetrating several layers of leather. Now that I'm finished, I can stitch the rest of my case together. Using a piece of sandpaper or a rotary sander, smooth down the edges before burnishing. To finish, I'm going to apply a glossy sheen to the surface of the case. Apply thin, even coats, and as many as necessary until you get the desired results. Finished. Let's see how it looks.